Let's get to the rest of the week's top stories with our U.S. Report regular, former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, another big week, and it seems like another Republican presidential nomination debate. We had a bunch of hopefuls go head-to-head for debate number 4, and there was no shortage of theatrics, particularly from Vivek Ramaswamy, who had a big old go at Nikki Haley. Have a look.
Nikki, I don't have a woman problem. You have a corruption problem. And I think that that's what people need to know. Nikki is corrupt. This is a woman who will send your kids to die so she can buy a bigger house. This is the problem. Using identity politics more effectively than Kamala Harris is a form of intellectual fraud. And it actually needs to end. There's our donor puppet masters wielding their puppet right up here tonight. This is how this game is played.
Well, Mick, the Oxford Debating Society, this was not. You were there at the debate. I'd love your take on that and how it all went.
Yeah, James, that was actually probably one of the highlights for Vivek Ramaswamy last night. He performed very, very poorly. It was almost as if he was auditioning for a social media job as opposed to the president of the United States. Those types of shenanigans were regular last night. He was attacking everybody who he possibly could. He was going over time. He was talking over people. It was really a bad experience. CNN in this country, who of course leans heavily left, gave him an F- last night on his debate. They gave Nikki Haley an A, if you can believe that. So nobody is pleased with Vivek Ramaswamy's performance last night. He really did embarrass himself. My guess is, because of the way the Republican National Committee is raising the thresholds on how well you have to do in polling to get on the next debate stage, this is the last we've seen of Vivek Ramaswamy in this campaign nationally, and folks are happy to see the backside of him.
Yeah, look, my whole impression was that he was playing for the Twitter grabs and not necessarily for, anything else. But, what is the point then of these debates going forward? Because my impression, I'd love to hear what you think. I think Ron DeSantis did very well without the pressure of a Trump, in the room or in his ear or living rent-free in his head, perhaps. I thought Nikki Haley, she comported herself well, although I didn't agree with everything she had to say. But why are people like Chris Christie and Vivek still out there trying, to make their case?
Well, Chris Christie is easy because he hates Donald Trump, and any chance he gets to tell you how much he hates Donald Trump, he's going to take. And that's somewhat refreshing. At least we know why he's there, and he's being honest and straightforward about it. As to the other folks, it's sort of anybody's guess. There's probably more than one answer to your question. Nikki Haley might be running for a cabinet position. She might be running for vice president. She might be running for a slot on the 2028 ticket. Ron DeSantis might be running for some of the same things, although I don't think he's on a vice presidential candidate. In fact, no, he's not running for the cabinet because he would never work for Donald Trump. But he might be running for 2028. And all of them are sort of running, saying, you know what, if Donald Trump gets hit by a bus tomorrow, look at me. Because I don't think they're actually trying to catch him. In fact, there was an entire segment last night. Again, I worked for the company that put on the debate here in the United States, and we put in an entire section for 20 minutes, giving those folks the chance to attack Donald Trump, and only Chris Christie would do it. It's almost as if they're afraid to attack him. So are they running for second place? Maybe. Are they running for 2028? Maybe. But the bottom line is the needle did not move, and if the election were held today, Donald Trump would win going away in the Republican primary.
And how much damage did Chris Christie do? I don't have a grab of it, but he did talk about or refuse to, criticize the way the Justice Department and some of those machinations of the legal system have been weaponized against Donald Trump, which seems to be a core belief, I think a correct one largely, on the Republican side. Has he just completely damaged his credibility here in his attempt to just keep getting a platform to smack the Donald around?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of credibility. I don't know if it's him because it's been a while since Chris Christie has been in the public eye in the United States, or if I don't know if he's just the wrong messenger. His message was pretty good last night. His message, look, if you're going to try and catch Donald Trump, here's the message. There's a really good chance he's going to get convicted. And the polling data, and by the way, the network that put on the debate last night did really good polling data. I looked at it in depth. And what the polling data showed is that up to a third of the Trump voters think he should be disqualified from the ballot if he's convicted of a crime. And what Christie said last night, look, if a third of his voters leave him because he's convicted, he's never, ever, ever going to win against Joe Biden. Therefore, you should vote for me. That's the message. It's just falling on sort of deaf ears because no one wants to vote for Chris Christie.
That does seem to be what the polls are telling us. Now, speaking of Donald Trump, he decided not to attend the debate. He instead did a town hall with Fox the night before. Is this a good strategy for him? I mean, is he going to wind up debating Joe Biden? And do you think there's even, if he becomes a nominee, as we presume he does, will the Democrats even consent to a debate with Donald Trump?
In fact, I said on the airplane tonight, this morning, coming back from Alabama with one of the members of the Republican National Committee, and they've sort of resigned themselves to the fact there probably won't be a debate between Trump and Biden. Trump would be desperate to want one, of course, but the Republican National Committee has not agreed to the rules of the bipartisan debate commission, and Biden doesn't want one anyway. So the chances of us seeing them in a debate are probably close to zero. Going to Trump's town hall last night when he said he'd be a dictator on day one, I've spent a lot of time with the president. This is his way of trolling his detractors. He doesn't really mean he's going to be a dictator on day one. He knows the response that it's going to get. He knows the media cycle it's going to drive. He knows it's going to suck all of the air out of the attention that went to the debate last night. And he was right about that. Again, he's one of the best gut politicians I've ever seen in my entire life. Is the left setting their hair on fire tonight over his comments? Yes. Are folks like me who are critical of the president from time to time worried he's going to be a dictator? No, our system simply doesn't allow that. But if you hate Donald Trump, he gave you all the more reason to do so again last night.
Well, I want to ask you, the last week I've seen this fascinating thing where the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic Monthly have all come out with very similar big, long think pieces about how Trump is going to be a dictator. They're calling him, they're saying, well, at least Hitler had standards is basically what some of these things are saying. Are we seeing in this kind of these elite media outlets the strategy now being put out that the Democrats are going to be running against Donald Trump?
Oh, no, that's you're absolutely right. That is the playbook. The playbook right now for the Democrats, for Joe Biden, and for every race down ballot, for the Senate, for the House, for governor, I don't care, for dog catcher, is that if you vote for the Republicans in general, and if you vote for Donald Trump specifically, democracy is going to end. That is the playbook. When the Democrat Party that sends out their messages to all of their surrogates, all of the major media outlets see that, and they're picking up on that. They all go to the same parties together. They all went to the same schools together. They all hang out in a group. So it doesn't surprise me that you get this sort of group think and this consistent message across all levels of the left-leaning media. They can't run right now. Joe Biden is really struggling, James, on issues of the border. Goodness gracious, on the economy. He's really having a trouble even on Gaza. So they have to have a different topic. And right now the topic is, if you vote for Republicans, and specifically Donald Trump, the world is going to end. And they're deadly serious about that. It remains to be seen if that's a winning argument.
Yeah, I suspect people might think that's a little overcooked, as we say here in Australia. But you mentioned the border. Interesting thing here this week, Senate Republicans have blocked an emergency funding bill which would have given aid to Ukraine and Israel. They're instead calling for tougher border measures as the migrant crisis worsens. This is a real interesting game of chicken that's happening here. I mean, I think the Democrats are making a bit of a strategic mistake trying to mix Israel and Ukraine too much. But are the Republicans on a winner saying, this at-home issue, the border, is the thing that we really need to focus on first? How is this playing out on the Hill and more broadly?
Yeah, I'll speak to the politics of it. We can talk about the practicalities of the real-world applications if you want to, but the politics of it, the Republicans are actually going to win on this issue just because the border is such a huge issue right now across both parties. You and I have talked at length about the impact of this open border on cities, Democrat cities like New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Even the Democrat mayors of those cities are complaining about the border. The border has become a bipartisan issue, and the Republicans are making some pretty good political hay trying to tie border security to just about anything else they can get. They're also upset, by the way, James, because of this $106 billion that the Biden administration has asked for. It's an astronomical sum of money. Only $10 billion is earmarked for Israel. 60 billion, more than half, goes to Ukraine, which a lot of the Republicans are really, really iffy about. So the practicalities are one side. Whether or not they have a chance to sort of deal with this before the end of the year when the Biden administration says Ukraine's going to run out of American money, that remains to be seen. But the politics of it right now are working in the Republicans' favor because the border is such a big issue with people outside of the traditional circles.
Mick Mulvaney, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on the U.S. Report.
Thanks, James.